My Hangouts is white for some reason. I don't know
Is
why it's white.
white
It's
instead of
really,
black? You mean with like the
yeah,
background? Oh, that's disconcerting.
it's really, really disconcerting. I'm not really quite sure what's happening. But my computer background went black when it wasn't black. So I obviously have done something and need to reverse it. The
You need,
last week has been a time of change. I've rearranged my entire office. Now I can't write.
oh
And
no. Now you can't find anything. Oh
I can
no.
find now everything. I can find everything. It's clean. There's tons of room, but I just can't write. I mean, for some reason, I've got like a 5,000 word story on my computer that just keeps going and going and going in the beginning. Just keep adding words this beginning. I have no clue what's beyond like page 4.
Oh no.
Yeah. When I
Well,
end up finding out that I'm deleting like 5,000 words of it.
isn't
Oh,
there
it's an
like a
8 word
quote
story.
though? There's some kind of quote that's I forget who even said it, but it's like a writer is someone who's written today. So
I don't know what I did today or yesterday for that matter. I did find my first sentence and then I edited it today. Right?
that
How's
was a
how's
terrible first sentence. Let me do that over.
right? Oh, no, that was a mistake. Oh man, I hate that when you think you've done something really well and you read back over it and it's missing a word. It's completely illegible and it's like, what am I exactly wasting time or actually achieving anything?
It's
How's your
what's the difference?
what's the difference exactly?
Yeah, what's the difference?
How's your pirate book coming? You working on it
Oh,
at
I
all or?
haven't really done very much. I just have like a real brief outline. And I haven't even pitched it to the publisher yet. So it doesn't mean I wouldn't write it if they didn't want it. But most likely what I'll do is get a really nice detailed table of contents and like a beautiful first chapter and an introduction and a description and all of that. And that's enough at this point for me to send that to a publisher, to my publisher. I probably could get away with a table of contents and an introduction, to be honest, since they kind of know. And then if I get a deadline and a royalty advance hanging over my head, I probably would then dedicate a lot more time to it.
Could you
So
do that nowadays, like a normal person, not a Varla Ventura, but like a me? Could I write an outline and send it to any publisher and have it a
I,
shot, or is
I,
that
it,
gone?
um, it, I don't really know how it works for fiction. For nonfiction, you do not need to have the book written. I know that 100%. Even for a
Still
non,
today, even
what
for
you need
non.
is a detailed table of contents, a nice cover letter, a complete chapter, typically, a little bit of the introduction, and then a bit of a market analysis. So, for example, for
So,
me, my market analysis would be how many books my other copies sold. Or also, there are all these great pirate books on the market. So I could find a pirate book, one of the ones that I've been reading, and I could use that for, okay, I can look it up and see that it had, I don't know how I would look it up. I would send it to the publisher and they would look it up, like, had 10,000 books sold in the first year, whatever. I mean, some books, are bestsellers because you see them all the time and they're on bestseller lists and things.
yeah,
So for fiction, I think you can send a query letter and a sampled chapter and an outline of what the plot is, but you have to typically have the whole book written
yeah,
by that time or close at least, because when they want to see it, they want to see the whole, because fiction's different. With nonfiction, you can kind of be like, oh yeah, okay, we can see what the last chapter is about, and you don't have to have all of that. And that's not just true for me. That's true for anyone writing. Like, let's say you wanted to write a book on the process of creativity,
yeah.
you would, you'd send an outline. You talk about your qualifications. It's almost like applying for a job in a way, really nice cover letter. But
I
some
should do like a
publishers
week.
don't take, they call it unsolicited.
Yeah,
Um, Now, they might not take unsolicited manuscripts, but that doesn't mean you can't send a query letter. And the query letter is just that. It's just a letter that says, "Dear blah blah blah," well, if you can get their name, or "Dear Sir, Madam," or "Madam" or "Sir," or "Dear whatever," to whom it may concern. And then you kind of list in that one little letter what your book is, what it's about, and what your qualifications are. And may I send you the manuscript? And then they would contact you and say, yeah, it sounds amazing. You're amazing. Oh, you're Bryan Aiello? Oh my God.
right.
We
Always
love
wanted to
you. We've been waiting for you to query us.
true.
Ah. But then I think so that's what agents do. Agents help you with that and do that for you, which for a
Absolutely.
lot of writers, that can be a very stressful process. For me, because I have experience on both ends, both as working with publishers behind the scenes and as a writer, that part of the process doesn't intimidate me as much because I kind of know how it works. But then again, I've never tried to sell a work of fiction, and I think in that case, I think that would be more challenging.
Oh yeah, it is. Do you have an agent?
No,
No.
hell no.
Right. I'm
I
tempers
barely get paid enough to make it worth my time to write these books. If I had to give a cut to an agent, that would, that would suck.
it would suck, right? And that people do though. I mean, marginally making an existence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
nice.
Well, I mean, the theory is that if you find an agent, they also agents negotiate bigger advances. So, they might offer you something and then the agent it's almost like trying to buy a house directly from a seller versus like or trying to sell a house yourself versus having an agent who knows all the like tricks and shows you how to stage it and tells you where to paint and things like that. It's like your house is going to sell faster and you're going to get more money for it, but you're going to have to give a cut.
I look at it like I can't say no when I have to sign a contract. I mean, I want to argue. I want to say this is bullshit. I don't like this part, but I have to say yes. I have to sign this because I want my piece published. I want people to read my stuff. I want my byline out there. And
Sure.
I can't say no to you. You want what? Half of my liver? Sure, take it. Publish my fiction. It's cool. But an
Well,
agent doesn't care. You know what I
and
mean? They'll like,
often the first work you don't get as good of terms on, and that's okay because you get your name out there, and if it's successful, then you can negotiate demands. Just never sign a contract that guarantees you'll um, exclusive rights for the next book because you don't want to sign like don't sign a 2-book contract if you don't like the deal.
yeah,
Most publishers request first right of refusal, which is that doesn't mean that they have to give you what they gave you last time. Like they could give you more, you know,
yeah. Well,
but
depending how well your first book did. I mean, if it did exceptionally, you might get more. If it did crap, then you're probably not going to get anything.
right.
Yeah. How are you? Are you writing any fiction? Are you doing anything? What are you doing, Varla?
Yeah. Well, I think I kind of did I tell you last time about like all the stupid health stuff, health issues I've been having?
No, you bumped your head. That was the only health stuff
Okay.
that you
Yeah.
told me
So
about.
actually, this is all kind of related to that. I bumped my head. And then it turned out that I guess that was like February. So in the beginning of June, I'm not a person who's had a lot of back issues. That's not a area for me that I've had problems. I know a lot of people have had them their whole lives, but for me, I've never really had back problems. And then like my back was kind of hurting on and off, with sort of low back pain. It's just like, oh, okay, I'm just getting old, whatever. And then one day I woke up in like early June and I was just like, man, this is not just like, boy, my back is stiff and I should take a couple of ibuprofen. This is like crazy. And by that evening, my leg had gone like totally numb.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then so I ended up like going to the doctor and they diagnosed it as one thing and then I had to go to the ER and they diagnosed it as something else. And basically, 2 months later and after an MRI, I have a ruptured disc, but I also have I have a fracture and I
Wow.
have like spinal movement.
From
So
that injury from falling.
so they said they don't know like things like those stress fractures, that's something, and even the movement so basically my vertebrae don't line up. And they said that even that movement, that could be something you live with your whole life. But what probably happened is that that fall irritated the my like the discs, and the discs eventually just got like with all the additional shifting and stuff in my back, it got aggravated. But yeah, it's now been like week 12. I've had all kinds of weird procedures. I've had a couple of epidural injections, and Thursday I go see a follow up with the surgeon, and Probably going to be looking at spinal fusion surgery. Um,
Horrible. That's horrible.
yeah, so here's the silver lining because you asked me, like, "What are you writing?" And, that's what I've been just, like, imagining because I started reading about the spinal fusion process, and they do these bone grafts, and so I started thinking, "What if you got, like, the bone, cells of, like, a killer, and what would happen?" So
Oh my God.
I'm totally going, like, 1950s, like,
I
horror
totally understand that thinking
right?
too.
Right, Ryan?
I had a piece of bone implanted into my jaw,
Oh,
you know,
really?
a periodontal situation. So they wanted to build it up or whatever. So they put a piece of cadaver bone in there.
Yeah, cadaver bone,
My fucking God,
right?
it's so
And
freaky. It's
I
like
know,
seriously. And
I
then
know.
I will tell you this much too. I've never had issues with skin issues or whatnot. But after they did this implant, like a year later, I started getting psoriasis on my legs. It was like, but
Oh my
I just
god,
had,
and they don't tell you who your donor is. I
they
know,
don't
but
tell
it's
you
just
shit about anybody. It's like, who is in my mouth right now? And
oh
I
my
don't know if
god.
it worked. I mean, my
My mom
body
told
probably
me
just
that
took it and dissolved it.
my mom had, oh god, cataract surgery,
Yeah.
and she said, "Oh, I have cadaver eyes," and I was like, "Oh my god, that's
They took the
right."
lenses from my cadaver. My God.
Yeah, yeah.
My mother-in-law passed away and they begged my wife to consider letting them take her eyes.
Oh,
And she
that's
was
such a
so
hard
oh my
decision
God,
to
she was so
make.
devastated. It happened like all of a sudden. She
Yeah.
couldn't make the
Oh,
decision.
no, you can't
But
really make that decision. I
I
mean,
wasn't
if it's
about
the
to say, "Babe, you need
person's
to oh, blah, blah." No, she need you need to make that decision for your son,
exactly, so if
right? I mean,
somebody
I need to make
hasn't
that decision.
designated that, to leave it to the loved
Yeah,
ones to
exactly. I mean,
do,
that's inappropriate, right? Why are you gonna call somebody who just lost somebody and ask for that? The deceased are
because
the ones that are
they're
supposed to
thinking
say
you're
it.
gonna save somebody's sight, and somebody's gotta make that awkward call
That's
because,
true. That's very true. Sight is important.
someone else is going to be able to see because of it, so that's or, get a new heart or, that's
Yeah.
how it works, but, yeah, that's a tough
And she was
decision to
devastated
make.
though. So
Yeah.
yeah, man, that stuff is hard. What
Yeah.
got on? The surgery that you're gonna be having.
Well, so I'll know on Thursday if I have the surgery or if they have some other kind of like crazy alternative treatment I haven't tried
You're
yet.
not a chiropractor person though, are you?
No, I've never been to a chiropractor and I wouldn't at this
No,
point.
yeah.
I'm actually not really supposed to be like messing around too much. So and it's gotten aggravated after like I did a few weeks of physical therapy and it got aggravated again. So
Oh
now
wow.
I'm just like, okay, how long do I ride this out? But the other thing is, yes, so I've had a couple of other short stories that I've written, and so I've been basically trying to make some
Sense of what's happening.
lemonade out of the lemons there because I and the ironic thing is, right, I do actually have more time to write because I can't do all the things I normally do. Like so much of my daily activities are limited that I have more spare time. So
Yeah.
I've been reading a lot too, which is always, if you need to write, I firmly believe if you want to write something, that just to be able to read a lot is the secret. If you're in a writer's block and you're in a slump,
Yeah,
read,
if you're
read,
not
read,
writing
read,
something,
read, read,
I
and
will
you'll get
say,
ideas and you'll appreciate I mean, if nothing else, you appreciate the process again of like
yeah,
how much it took someone to get to that point.
it's easier to read when you're not writing. When you're writing, it's so hard. And I think somebody recently told me this as well. And I agree. When you're editing, when you're working on words and you're reading somebody else's shit, you're like, it just aggravates you so much. You know what I mean? It's like, I want to edit this person's work, or I'm not writing as good as this person. It's like,
You
no,
know
I
what
can't
it is
read
for
while
me?
I'm writing.
99% of the novels that I read do not have the ending doesn't match the beginning or even the middle. And so that I always think so I like to read novels that I like especially fiction novels. And I also see for me if I'm not writing fiction, I'm talking about like if I'm writing a pirate book,
Yeah.
I actually
You're
read a
reading.
ton.
Yeah, I'm
And
reading a ton too, right? Always on the internet, reading articles and starting books and figuring out how the best to hook people. But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, what am I actually doing? Starting books and putting them down.
yeah, well, it's hard to yeah, but I think that's the biggest challenge with fiction, especially with non even with nonfiction, it can be hard. It's like when you're done, you don't usually know you're done. You're kind of like, wait, with nonfiction, especially because you can move chapters around. Like it's the kind of books I read. It's like, do those progress properly the way that I want? is the ending, because I always feel bad not saying like goodbye and the end at the end of the book. It's like, oh, I can't just end it like that. So I often put a little note
You,
at the end,
but you have a hard time with goodbyes anyway because you do with me on the podcast, and
Yeah.
we're gonna
We
get,
never say goodbye.
you never do. You're hard. You're bad at it. Like, okay, now what? Most of my guests are like, "Are we done?
I
Please say we're
know.
done."
It's like, we're not done. We just got
I was
started.
done 15 minutes ago. I haven't talked in 15 minutes, dude. You've been doing nothing but doing all the talking. I did. I had an interview with Robert Zabrin, something like that. Zubrin. He's an engineer, scientist. Wrote a book called The Case from Mars or something like that.
Oh, okay.
I was so freaked out the entire time trying to
Oh,
talk
no.
to him. I made a horrible joke to start it out with. I cut that because
Oh,
it did
like you
not.
mean you were nervous talking to
Yeah.
him?
Oh yeah. Like
Oh.
tight chested, couldn't breathe the entire time. Like I'd make a joke and he would say, "That's not right." I was like, "Of course it's not right. It's a joke. What's up?" It's like I lasted like 48
Oh.
minutes. I cut out like at 48 minutes. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And I just published it, and I got a comment on YouTube saying, "You should shut up and let Dr. Z talk. You're interrupting him with your idiotic, uninformed ramblings." I'm like, oh my God, it was that obvious.
Yeah, it's just one stupid person. Like whenever I do radio interviews, okay, so here's two pieces of advice. One, never read the comments on Amazon. Honestly, I mean, if you're a consumer, fine, read them, but don't, as an author, don't go and read the comments on
Try to get
Amazon
something out of it.
because you
Constructive
can't
feedback is
change
not
them. People
there.
are completely entitled to their opinion, and it's just going to upset you. And likewise, don't like, okay, so when I go on radio interviews all the time, like half the time, it's like an internet radio and there's a chat room. And I have occasionally been asked to join the chat room. They're like, "Oh, we have this chat room," and I never join the chat room. I cannot do two things at once. I cannot respond to people and be talking to a host. And on top of all of that, I don't really want to know what people are, saying or thinking about me because it'll
But
trip me up, right?
isn't
It's
the
like,
state of the modern world though? I mean that's interesting because I don't do something like that. Obviously, I don't have an audience to develop a chat room. I mean, I can ask my wife; she'd probably be more than happy to sit there and not, continue working at her job and
And
then
and and
have
I'm not
this.
saying all the hosts do that, like, a lot of hosts have someone running the chat room for them, and they'll pop in and say hi on, like, the commercial breaks or whatever, but, like, oh, it just I did it once. I was on Coast to Coast, and I went and I was, like, on the
Oh
Facebook
God,
page, and I read all these comments that people were saying about me, about the host, and I was just like, "You know what?
were they
Why
just
did I do
bad? I
this?
mean,
This just threw me off," It's like, "This just threw me off."
were
Which
they
is
awful
why
comments?
What's that?
Were they just bad comments?
Oh, yeah, just all kinds of, like, so and so doesn't know what he's talking about. This woman sounds crazy, which actually doesn't bother me. But the thing is that's why I'm a writer. I don't perform
Yeah.
in front of a live studio audience. I'm not a
Oh,
performer.
you
I'm a
bring that up.
writer.
I'm
So
wondering honestly whether or not I should perfect my public speaking abilities. I actually am thinking about doing was it Toastmasters? Start going
oh
to that
yeah,
just so I can
yeah,
start practicing.
yeah,
I mean, this comment really bothered me, but at the same time, if you look at things like that constructively, are you crazy? Yes, we're all crazy on some level or
right.
another. Why does
Honestly,
that
I was
stupid
like,
asshole
yeah,
think you're crazy?
yeah, and
But
and
I want to be able to engage, right? I want to be able to engage with you on a level that you appreciate, and I want my wife to be also on that list of people I engage with on a constructive level. I mean, I want to be able to conversate, and be able to articulate myself.
oh, I think you
Well,
do.
I hope so.
Yeah.
That guy didn't think so. And that
Yeah, but
interview
who's
was
that guy?
actually
That guy's
very
probably
frustrating.
just jealous because that man refused to be on his show because he's a blathering idiot. I mean, that's probably the more likely scenario. You think,
Maybe.
I mean, hey,
It's very
you know what else? At least he listened. He listened all the way through, and you got one more like,
that's
view.
that's
So
very true. I mean, ultimately it was a great experience, right? I mean, you know about this guy's book and he says yes to be on the podcast and you have a 50-minute conversation with him, which is pretty cool. But
yeah, well, and
ultimately
I
he
think a
wasn't
lot of
willing.
interviews start out awkward. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, he didn't want to have an interview. He didn't want to have a conversation. He didn't want.
what
That's what I do. I try to talk to you. You know what I
right?
mean?
He wanted
And
to
he
just
wanted to
answer
get
questions or
talking points. He had them all memorized. He wanted to regurgitate them, and
Okay, so
and do
as an
this.
author, your publisher always asks you to submit suggested interview questions. This is like an insider secret if people don't know this, and I probably shouldn't even be revealing it. But you send in these suggested interview questions, and the hosts, if they request them, can go off of those. And this is pretty common, especially if you get like a last minute interview or something like that, where you're filling in for someone. um, Good hosts can kind of look over those and get an idea for what they're going to ask you and then have a conversation from that. I have occasionally been asked questions directly from those author questionnaires, those kind of like ten questions. But what I do is I tend to make sure that my questions are something that will naturally lead into a conversation about something, so that it
Yeah.
feels like the
Well,
host, whether
you
they've
are.
read the book or not, can kind
Yeah.
of, have
Well,
a
you are
conversation.
actually a very, very conversational person. I like having conversations with you because you're very engaging. I could twist and turn and be crazy, and you'll just go with me. It's awesome, and we could
Yeah,
talk
like
forever.
here we
We've
are.
had
We're
like,
like what, 20 minutes in, and we've been already just talking about the creative process and, you know, health,
yeah, anything that
ourselves,
comes up, right? I mean, that's what it is. I mean,
the
this topic,
struggle,
the
the
struggle.
creative struggle. I think we talk
Sure.
about that a lot. That's kind of a very shared experience that we both
Well,
have, is
the
the
wounds are fresh. I mean, I just got off my computer about what 20 minutes ago, staring at this document that's haunting me. Okay, I'll just start over from the very beginning again and work my way through it. Damn it, got distracted.
and the distractions are, it's so hard to not be distracted by your daily life, your daily
Twitter.
duties,
I have three
daily
monitors in front of
activities.
me. Twitter's on one of them. I shouldn't have that there. I'm distracted. Oh,
I
23 new
don't do
tweets.
Twitter. I can't. Twitter is way too much, too fast. I literally feel like I'm on like the world's, like a never-ending roller coaster or something. And I like roller coasters fine once in a while, but I like them to end so that I can, go on something else, go into the fun house for a while.
It's interesting. My Twitter is not like that. It's very spastic. I put a comment out, nothing happens.
Well, I don't really use it. I mean, I have an account, and I sometimes remember to put stuff on there. And when I'm on shows a lot, I just forget about it. And it's just not, hey, it's pretty obvious that I'm a verbose person, right? Twitter
Yeah.
is not for me.
Well, I don't know. That's the thing, right? There's a rule I learned that journalists have to follow when they have a real journalist job. They have to tweet up to like 6 to 8 times a day. Like their job is to tweet on their
That,
accounts about
yeah,
news and yeah, and
yeah,
everything.
I can see that. People
And then
engage
my
like
data
that.
is like engaged in content constantly. I mean, Google gives it to me, Reddit gives it to me, Twitter gives it to me. I'm constantly reading articles, I'm researching things for stories, and like realized I could tweet a lot more than 6 or 7 things a day. You know what I mean? I can cut pictures off of things and cut information. I mean, it's so simple just to fill up my Twitter
But
with crap.
but then you'll just be like doing it all day.
No, it takes a second. It's like if I tweet 8 times, it's like maybe 8 times 30 seconds. What is that?
Okay,
Four
but
minutes of
that
life?
1 second that you're putting into that has probably distracted you for 10 to 15 minutes from whatever you were working on, and then you've
It's not
lost your
that big of a deal.
flow.
But I'm not like a normal person though, because I'm like hardcore dedicated. So I'm like all about it every day. Deadline City. I have until September 15th to write a 2,500 word story that has grown to 5,000 words.
And that's
Unfortunately,
because you you impose that deadline?
no, that's my contract.
Okay, well, so you did get a contract.
Yeah, it sucks. I hate those things. They
Oh,
really
that's
are. They make me
great.
so
No, no, no,
nervous.
that's great. That's great. That's awesome that I didn't realize that you actually were writing to a contract at this point. Yeah, that's pressureful.
I like it.
2,500 words and you've got twice as much. Okay, and you have to do by what? By, what'd you say,
September.
mid-September?
I'll be done this week. I'll be after I get off with you. I'm hoping to have a draft today.
So
Now
you're
it's just
done with it, but you just need to cut it down and figure out how to make sure
yeah,
it's meshing back together.
basically, and it
See,
needs an
I like
ending.
that part of the process because it's a break. I think that part of the process is a bit easier than the actual like finishing of the story.
Not me. This is the worst part because if you've ever read my fiction, you'll see I leave mistakes in all the time. I can't see them. That's why I'm not a good mathematician. That's why I can't do math. I
But you're a
make
writer, not an
mistakes.
editor. So I think, just between you and me, if you turn it in, you and me and all of our audience, if you turn it in 300, 400 words over count, the editor will go through and cut it.
They love it, actually. These people want they want long stuff. They have a podcast too, so they fill it up.
Oh,
They
that's so
have
cool.
on my,
Well, you cut
uh
1,000 words and see where you're at. That's not that hard to
I'm
do.
definitely cutting 1,000 though. It is getting
Go
short.
go in and just search for the word "that,"
Well, it
and I
doesn't have an
guarantee you, you can cut the word "that" from almost every sentence, and that will
I'm not
save you
even at
probably.
that point. The story, had to be a particular genre, had to be slasher fiction, with a knife, yeah.
Ooh, I can't wait to read
So,
it.
I'll definitely hook you up with a copy. I'll let you be one of my beta readers if you want.
I would love to. That is exciting.
But I couldn't
That's like
decide
my
my
favorite.
slasher for, like, ever. I had, like, 3 different versions, and this one's gonna stick, I think, all the way through, so now I have to get rid of the other 2 versions that,
I'll
like,
just put
echo.
them in a new doc, who knows?
Yeah,
They
but they
might
echo
they might
throughout this entire thing. They flavor certain things, and I have to get rid of all those stupid little tiny echoes that exist, and finally cement the ending and figure out, which direction this thing happens in. But it's done. I mean, it is done. The bulk is there. The words are there. I just have to decide if this is. I mean, just decide what to cut. Yeah, exactly. You're right. You said 1,000 words is going to go between now and the end of the week for sure.
Yeah, that'll be nah, I
My
like that
dumbass will
part of the
write 1,000
process.
words on top of that too.
I think I told you with my last contract, I believe I told you this, that with my last contract, I misread it.
I
And
know
then
you said you bulked it up, right? You sent an extra.
I thought for some reason I thought it said 65,000 words, which is a pretty hefty,
Yeah.
especially for the little format. My books are small and little 5 by 7 numbers, and it'd have been a pretty thick book. I thought 65,000 words, okay, and I got to I remember adding in some longer things that I thought, okay, this stuff that I had written for, like some things I had cut from the mermaid book, and I was like, okay, well maybe I can beef it up with this. And then I turned it in, and my editor immediately was like, she called me, and okay, she called me. That's not good. It's not even through email communication. Uh-oh. And she said,
Mercy.
"It's wonderful, but it's way too long. And I said, "What do you mean? I got it up to 65." And she said, "Your contract was for 45,000 words.
Oh, that's
I think you're supposed
incredible
to
cut
sign
right
in."
there. 20,000.
And I was like, "Oh my god." I said, "I'm such an idiot. I actually
Yeah.
struggled to get
You're
to
not
that."
an
And I
idiot,
was
but God,
I was
20,000
thinking the
words is a
whole
lot.
time, like, man, I really blew it. Or I was thinking, why did I sign a contract for 65,000 words? That's what I was thinking the whole time. So in some ways, I was relieved because there were some parts that I had put in that I felt that weren't really up to snuff. But I was honestly like, what else am I going to put in here? There's only so
We
much
need
to
to
say. And
finish it.
also, I was trying not to be redundant with previous books, so I didn't want to have like a bunch of stuff that
Yeah.
So anyway, that was it was a relief, and I think we kind of settled in the middle. Like I think in the end, I got to about 50 to 55,000 words. It was like
Wow.
53,000, and sent it back. And I said, "What do you think? Is this enough to cut?" I didn't want to cut a whole chapter, which was the easy way out would have been just cut a whole chapter, but I didn't want to do that. So
It sounds like you write like I do, where you kind of weave things in and out. And if you do kind of cut something out, you have to go through the entire freaking work to figure out.
yes, because I'll reference something from the first chapter and the sixth chapter. But then, of course, yeah, I try and take those things out. But I have learned over the years that a good editor and copy editor, that's what they are there for, to help find those things. And the way
Yeah.
that works for me is the editor looks at it, she makes suggestions. I always listen to her. And then I send it along. And when it starts going through the more finite publishing process, I have a copy editor who goes line by line, not a proofreader, but a copy editor who finds those glaring errors and finds the quote that you didn't get permission for because you thought, it was short enough, or any little things like that. And she points those out. And, if you're lucky, you get it back and it's all real easy to address. And then you just respond to all of those things and make those corrections. And then, so you kind of have another set of eyes, but also, it's a thinking person's um, process. Like a copy editor isn't just, and this is no offense toward proofreaders. Proofreaders are more like the people that go line by line and they're like, oh, you missed a space. Oh, you used a colon here instead of a semicolon, things like that. A copy editor is more like a creative editor where they look through and they read the thing
Yeah.
as a whole rather than as a
I
individual
didn't
line by
understand there were two
line.
different things over a year ago. I thought that we're one person. The person that edits will tell you that this doesn't make sense poetically. You need to work on this theme. What did this character actually do? Nothing. Nobody's saying like that. My wife doesn't understand that's the way literature works. She understands how grammar works very well, so she could fill in all the grammar gaps for me. But the
Right.
copy stuff isn't there. You know what I mean? I have to reach out to a friend that's an actual writer and say, "Will you look at this, please, and tell me what an idiot I am?"
And that is
And they,
actually what agents do, kind of act in that regard. They can act as your individual editor in that
yeah.
way. Like they will help you with developmental editing. And I have a friend who I took a few writing classes from her back when many years ago. And over the years, have become friends, and we've talked a lot about agents and contracts. And she had an agent do a really, really like major rewrite of one of her works, and
Oh,
I
ow.
saw her the next day and she actually looked like she had, she almost looked like she'd been in a fight. You know what I mean? Like she was
Oh.
just like, I just read all my agent's comments, and the agent's trying to sell it and trying to help, and a good agent won't won't hold back. But I could see in her face that it was,
That's what you want,
it
though,
was a
isn't
hard,
it?
it's, and I thus far haven't had too many major problems like that, because again, when I send in my table of contents, I mostly stick to that. But I did have the big thing with the contract this last time, and in addition, I I had sent the table of contents as my original proposal, and I had actually misplaced that. This is for the fairy book. I had sent a table of contents with my proposal, and then I had an additional table of contents that I had started as I was writing the book, and I mixed them up. And so when I sent it to the publisher, they said, the editor was like, well, this is great, but we were hoping it was going to follow this. And they sent back my original table of contents. And I was like, oh, damn, that is so much better. I totally forgot about that. And so it wasn't like, it was more a matter of what I was calling the chapters and the order that they were in. And I was able to kind of, cut and paste a little and rewrite some of it. But it was just, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I told you I was going to write. Yeah. Thanks. I was like, oh man.
The way I write and the way my literary career is working is I send stuff out to magazines and they tell me whether or not it's good by sending me back that form rejection letter. No, thank you.
Right.
That's basically the only copy editing I do on my short stories. I mean, the idea that somebody would take the time and rip a story apart to try to make me a better writer would make me thrilled. You know what I mean? Because I'm not have to take any advice they give. I got my degree in creative writing. Chances are I'm not going to be surprised by what they're saying. You know what I mean? I've been
Right. But it's
blasted.
hard to see it in your own work sometimes.
Oh, hell no. I would love it. I wish it happened more
I
often
mean, it's
because it
hard
doesn't.
for you to see it as a writer, is what I'm saying. Like, you're not going to see it the way an editor would see it.
No, exactly. I mean, I'm not going to see it the way an editor sees it because that's not my job, right? My job is to create stories. That's what I want to do. That's what I do all the time, unfortunately, to everybody around me's chagrin. I am horribly addicted to that. Probably same as you, right? So I mean, that's all I want to do is get that process out as easily as possible, so I can move on to the next project. And that means
Right.
like mechanically learning grammar, so it just comes out, and you don't have to think about it anymore. And those mistakes disappear, and you stop making those same dumb ones over and over and over again. Unfortunately, though, I type with like three fingers. So
Oh, do you? Oh,
yeah,
no.
no, I do.
Oh,
I type
I'm
with
like
three
a
fingers on my
65 to
thumbs.
70 word per minute typer. I mean, when I'm
Don't
on a
have to look at the
roll.
keyboard.
So,
Yeah, man, that's
um,
retarded. If I could do that, it would be over. I'd be Stephen King would
I
be
took
like
typing in high
kissing
school.
my feet. Did you? I did too. I
Yes,
no, I
I
didn't.
loved it
I
on
took
typewriters. It was my favorite class. I absolutely, isn't that funny? That was my favorite high school class. I remember it the most, and probably the single most useful class
no
of any
kidding,
high school
right?
class I'd taken.
Why don't they just make kids take typing? I don't understand. They should have anyway. I mean, we're about the same age. Maybe at that time they didn't understand that the
So
computer
I
revolution
I
was going to take.
believe that about 2 years after I took typing, that's when they switched to computers, and it was still, but back then you also, it was mandatory. The driver's ed was included in your high school education.
It
It
was an
wasn't something you
option.
had to take on the side in the summer.
You
It
could have
was
gotten a
part of it.
break on insurance if you took driver's ed
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
school.
Yep, and then it was like it was driver's ed one half, and it was just there were a bunch of more practical kind of life skill classes, I think, and
I didn't like
I
those
mean,
classes.
life is different now, so oh, I love typing, though, I loved it so much, and I was so happy that I got to learn to type on typewriters. I still to this day remember the teacher standing up in front of the class going, "JKL, semi," and you would just like she would just say out the letters, and you were supposed to type, and the whole room, just the sound of the typewriters just oh, I
Music.
just loved it, and I'm totally I collect typewriters. I just love typewriters. Now I write on a laptop because hello, I'm not gonna like scan every. I mean, typing on a
Right.
typewriter.
That
But
would be horrible. I mean, I wish I wrote on a typewriter. I wish I typed like that. I wish I typed. Typing would be an amazing skill to have for me. I just can't do it. When I was a sophomore in high school, I fractured my arm in a football game. Fractured it right in half, snapped it in two, and had severe nerve damage. Like I couldn't even move my fingers. Are you there? And like I can't even play guitar really. Like I just feel so
still,
discoordinated.
oh, so you have permanent nerve damage
No,
from
I
it.
don't think so. I don't think it's permanent. I just can't like it doesn't feel like I can articulate my pinky and my second finger as well as I want to. They don't seem to stretch out as far. So maybe I do. I don't know. I've never brought it up to anybody before to look at, but I type with my pointer fingers and one middle finger
Uh-huh,
and my
uh-huh,
thumbs.
uh-huh. With your glasses, like, sort of sliding down your nose and a
Uh,
nice cozy sweater on or what?
I know I'm usually no, I'm joking. I won't say the word. No. I do type horribly. I make tons of mistakes. I never look at the screen as I'm
So
typing
when you're
until I'm like
really
done.
writing, then do you write longhand with pen and pencil? Because I actually do that a lot, pen and pencil with pen and paper or pencil and paper. I
Nope.
do that a lot when I get inspired and rather than like pull up my computer and so the computer has a lot of distractions, as you said, Twitter screen, all that kind of stuff. And so sometimes I'll just get myself going, or if I have a thought, I will write and I will write a passage, or if I'm traveling, which is when I get a lot of my inspiration. For example, the pirate book came to me when I was in Jamaica.
Oh,
So that makes sense, right?
right.
And it was just absolutely like this, like I'm just sitting there staring at the water, actually trying to like clear my mind, and I'm getting ready to leave, and I'm just staring at this blue water and kind of just thinking things through and thinking about my life and the state of things. And then all of a sudden this idea just popped into my head, and I grabbed I had my journal with me, and I just started writing down all these ideas. And I had to leave to go get fly home. And so when I like to keep my journal with me, because when I travel, or even if I'm just traveling around my town, or I have a few minutes, sometimes things just come to me. And when I will, no matter how great I think it is in the moment, I will lose the essence of that idea if I don't write it down,
Yeah.
always. So I have constantly have a journal of some sort on me, and a handful of pens. And it's not that I'll sit and write a whole chapters worth or anything, but I will write thoughts and ideas down so I don't forget them. But then sometimes I'll sit and I'll write out the majority of a chapter, or an introduction. The introduction to the book, whatever book I've written, has all been longhand. And then I'll take and look at it. And what's nice about that, just in terms of the creative process, for me, you write it longhand and then you're kind of transcribing it in. And there's a natural editing process that happens
Oh
during
yeah.
that experience, so that what ends up on the paper is a little bit more polished than what was in your, or what ends up on the document is a little bit more polished than what you wrote out.
I
So
wish, man. My penmanship is so horrible too, and I can't write
mine is
out
pretty
like
bad,
that.
especially if I get like really into something. I cannot write as fast as my brain is thinking, and
Yeah.
so I
You'll
have
skip things.
so sometimes I'll go back and I'm just like I'm looking and I'm like, what this is like, what was that word? Like, I mean, what is that word? I have no idea. So I might write three different words with question marks after them, just because I'm not sure what the word actually was. And then I'll go back and look at it later. It's like there's a several draft process. But I love talking to people about what their process is,
Right.
because
It is
there's
interesting.
always, I
So you
mean,
write every one of your manuscripts out by hand first before they enter the computer, or you write your outline by hand and then put it in the computer, or how do
I
you
pretty much
start?
always write my outline by hand. the rough outline. And then I always write the introduction and certain stories that I want to tell. For example,
Yeah.
if it's a story of mine, I like to write that out longhand. And then as I type it back in, there's, details I've forgotten, then I'll type those out. For this last book, Paranormal Parlor, I actually interviewed several people for their stories. And rather than have them just send me a document, um, in the interest of me getting to experience the story and having an excuse to talk to these people, and in the interest of having some kind of cohesion in the voice, I guess you would say.
The
I
voice of them,
Yeah,
of the person that
like
you're interviewing? Because that is
yes,
intriguing. That is very interesting because if you're telling the story, you're telling a story, your story, obviously it's your voice. But if you're going to tell somebody else's story, you need to capture an essence of that person. That's totally cool. I've
yes.
never even thought about that as
But at
being
the same time, you want to make sure that it doesn't jar the reader because it's not your exact writing. So in the past, I've approached it a couple different ways, having somebody do an as told to me or whatever. So that what I did this time is I interviewed people, and as they were telling me the story, I wrote down I took longhand paper, and I even had one guy say, "Are you recording this?" And I said, "Nope, I'm doing it the hard way." And I wrote down the everything he said. I wrote down notes. But what happened is I got to experience them telling me that story, which made it a lot more valuable and made me understand rather than me just reading it. It made me understand that I got to hear their beautiful details and the little asides that they said. And I try to
instead of
capture all of
instead of
that.
concentrating on the horrible imperfections of the recording and your own voice and what's happening in the background, or the nuance of what he said. Did he mean that the way that he
Yeah,
said
it
it? I
just
didn't
sounded
notice it at the
harder to
time.
me to do it
He
that
sounds like
way.
an
So,
asshole. Is he really an asshole? I didn't think he was an asshole in the moment. I will
right.
listen back to interviews and I will think of something that somebody said is funny in the moment. And then later on, 2 weeks later, I'll listen to it again and think, my God, that guy like made a crack at me. That's not cool. Delete, delete. Um, you know what I mean? It's like if you do record it, you are removed from the moment. They do say if you take pictures of things, the only thing you're going to remember of the event that you took pictures is that thing that you took a picture of. The whole memory is going to be gone because that will be the moment that you recall every single time.
Right, right. And so I just was able to get lost in the story. And then what I did, and I had to do this right away because otherwise you lose it. I had written the story down, and within a couple of hours of having that conversation while it was still reverberating in my head, I wrote it up in a, Word doc. And then I sent it to the person and said, please, like, there's a couple of times where I was writing, it's like, I think I got this date wrong, or there were details. So I would put a note in there for the person I'd interviewed. And I just said, can you please just look this over? Let me know if I've gotten something wrong. So essentially it was their voice, but it was my interpretation of their voice. And they were able to then have creative say over changes, with the understanding that the publisher might make minor edits for like copy editing or whatever, but that it was essentially going to be, they were going to be proud of the story that they told me, and it would appear in print the way that they felt good about. So, for example, one of the stories, I really wanted to call it something else. I had what I thought was this really clever title. And the person who told me the story was like, I want to call it this. And so I just called it what he wanted because, it was his story, and that's what he titled it. And most of these were not stories that had necessarily been put in print, but they were stories that were, people's experiences. Um, and it was really super cool. It was a really fun process. It inspired me when I started putting my own work in there. So the way that this book worked was quite different from some of the other ones. I had these stories that I originally thought, okay, I'm going to put this whole like as told to me horror, ghost stories. These are all going to be people's paranormal experiences. These are all going to be like chapter 1. And then chapter 2 is going to be this and this and this. And when I started getting the stories, I started seeing certain patterns and certain connections to other topics I was talking about. For example, one guy told me about this kind of humorous Ouija board experience. Well, I had a whole chapter talking about the spiritualist movement and this woman who had, we've talked before about the woman who channeled the novel via Ouija and things of that nature.
Jeff
So his
Harone.
Yeah, so his story made perfect sense to go in that chapter. And so it actually turned into this really cool thing where instead of it being everybody else's stories and all these stories kind of in a chunk, I was able to weave them throughout the book. And as a response to that, I had never put as many of my own personal experiences in previous books. And this one, I weaved them throughout because every story that I heard reminded me of something I had experienced. And it was just a kind of a totally different process than what I thought it was going to be. And I think it actually worked really well in its favor because instead of it being like this collection, this chunk of other people's works, it became part and instrumental to kind of the foundation of each chapter. It was like, and now, and sometimes that story was mine, sometimes it was someone had given it to me. Um, and it I think gives like a nice entertainment value to it as well because you're reading about one thing and then bam, you're in someone's story. So it was cool because it was a totally different, a pretty different approach. And also just like completely not how I had planned it. And I don't know if I even talked to the publisher about it. I think I was just like, let's see. This is
How
what I'm going to turn in.
how do you find the people that you talk to?
Most of the people that I talked to for this, I've been on their shows numerous times over the years since like even the Book of the Bazaar came out. And so I've kind of developed a camaraderie or friendship with them. And so I just emailed, I emailed a handful of people, only a couple people, so they didn't really have time or they didn't want to do it. But most of the people were either hosts that I've stayed connected with, so they have their own show, or a couple of really close friends who
Oh, so
have told me stories.
they're potentially regurgitating stories they've heard on air and stuff like that too sometimes.
No, these were their personal experiences.
You know what's really fascinating? I mean, that's exactly how I set up this podcast. And what makes it even more interesting is, my God, I would love to see a weekly or biweekly hosted a Varla Ventura hosted podcast that just basically interviews people about the experiences they have.
So I have my
Nowadays.
podcast, it's just I'm hoping to resurrect it from the dead because I've come to a standstill with not being able to I'm just not a good producer. I can create the content and I can do the interviews and I have a whole list of people to interview and several who have said yes. But I think we've talked
I really
before.
think that you would be a great host. I mean, like, God, the idea that you'd be able to just ask people questions and engage on this level. Not saying that I'm even able to keep up with you because your ideas involving what you do go far beyond what I'm able to talk about probably. But I mean, I would love my when we talk about this, my mind goes to making it happen for you, recording the interviews and then editing them and then putting them on your feed somehow, and you just be the host.
I know I'm so lame about that because I have two wonderful, wonderful episodes. It's a two-parter for California, and it's just waiting for me to edit it. And I actually did edit it, but I didn't do a good job, so you could kind of hear like words got cut off. So
But my opinion though is you don't really want to edit it. I mean, you want to keep it raw formed as a
oh no, this
conversation.
was where the person being interviewed said, actually, can you just take that out? That
I don't
kind of
know.
thing.
I mean, if you want, we could do something where we can do a hangout. You could do it with your guest on Hangouts are very easy. I could record it for you and then send you the raw, or we can just edit it down to whatever you want and you can post the whatever you want.
Okay. Well, I might take you up on that. I really,
But you really need to do
especially
more than once a while. I mean, you can't like make it perfect. I think you have to
right. No,
churn
no,
as
that's
many
true.
as possible.
And especially, and then the other thing that's so I have this, my framework are like all the different states, but I may need to let go of my alphabetical order for the time being
I think
because
so. I mean, it doesn't mean that you can't. I think so because it'd be so difficult unless you do all 52. You do them all, you put them in the can, and then you put them out next
right.
year. You know what I mean?
Like how
It's going to
many
require.
I'll tell you one thing that actually really kept me going with the podcast initially because I cannot listen to any. interview with me. I actually hate hearing my own interviews. I think I sound like a blathering idiot, and I'm just like, why am I can't stand the sound of my voice. I really can't. But then
You're
when
not
I
allowed to like the sound of your own voice. The voice inside your head is bouncing off so much shit to get outside. It sounds completely different. I mean, you think about
right.
it, it's got all those bones and muscle and whatever hairs that it's and it comes out. I mean, you're hearing something totally different than what's actually originating in the muscles and bones of your throat.
It's true, and then you're your own worst critic, you're just like, "Oh, why did I say that?" So, but when I heard I had to listen to the radio interviews that I conducted because I needed to listen to the final cut to make sure it was, something that I wanted to be released,
Hmm.
and I really didn't mind myself as an interviewer, probably
Yeah.
because I don't talk as much.
I find myself listening to these podcasts occasionally. I'll be editing them and forget that they're playing. And I'll listen to it thinking, God, that's interesting. Oh, that's me.
That's awesome.
No, I mean, I think you deserve to have a podcast. I really do. I keep having you
Well,
on because I would love to have a chapter called Varla Ventura's Great Adventures or something, where it's just me and you. But I want you to
so
have the curation abilities where you create the
mm.
actual show that you pick the guests. We procure the guests for you. We host you when the guest's talking. I have nothing to do with the conversation at all. Maybe you want me there just to keep notes. And then at the end of the day, we publish it under you on your website.
So go to like iTunes or whatever, and if you type in my name, you will find probably a few things will come up. There'll be individual interviews with me. A lot of the ones with you will come up. But if you look for Varla Ventura's Tales of the Strange, I think there's 4 episodes on there, and maybe you can listen to one or two. I would recommend. Um, What's my favorite one? Oh, the interview with I think it's for Arkansas, and it's an interview with Seth Breedlove, who made all these super cool. It's called Small Town Monsters, and he makes these like documentaries about lore and legends from these small towns, including like the Beast of Bray Road. And in the Arkansas one, we're talking about a creature there, and it's really cool. Anyway, those are kind of the first few, and I think at first we had
Oh,
some
there you are.
audio
Tales of
issues
the
and things
Strange.
like that. Yeah, it's called Tales of the Strange, and this particular season is called Strange America.
It's
So
been
the whole
almost a year,
podcast is
Marla.
called. I know, so sad,
I
right?
don't know. I mean, honestly, the only thing I would want my name attached to it because I'd want to ride
Of
your company,
course.
right into the freaking Pulitzer Prize that we're going to win.
Well, I'll
I
tell you
mean,
what, if I have to have spinal fusion surgery, I'm gonna have a lot more time to be, just doing I mean, I will be pretty limited with my movements for at least a month, and so to me, that seems like, well, might as well do the really nitpicky, like, editing stuff.
or we could make it easier. I don't know if I could even host more than 2 podcasts on my website.
I can host podcasts on my website. I paid the extra blah, blah, blah to be able to host those podcasts on my website.
What do I do though? What do I get, in terms of traffic on my site if I produce it? Should I write a blog about the experience?
Seems like you would need something on my site, right?
Well, I would be, right? It would be my podcast. My producing name would be on there. But do I want to be a pod? I mean, I just see this stuff so easily in terms of because I've worked on this one for a year.
Yeah,
Like
that's
you could
true.
put it, I
And
could
you're
see you hosting it so well. I mean, you are a great guest, no doubt. But if you had my seat, you're a lot smarter than me, and I think you're a lot
oh,
more
I don't know
articulate than
about
me.
that. I
So
just
I
I
think it would
just
just
know
work
more
well.
about a different topic than you do. I just
I
know
think you're an
more about
expert.
paranormal stuff, so it seems like I'm smart
Exactly.
than you.
Exactly. I mean, if I called, what did you say the guy's name was? Aaron Greenbaum.
Seth No, but that's a great character name. I love that, Aaron Greenbaum. You should write that down. I love that.
Well, like
Seth
Robert Zubrin. I mean, I'm trying to have
Seth
a
Breedlove.
conversation. I'm trying to have a
Now I
conversation with
love
this guy,
Aaron
right?
Greenbaum.
And I
I'll just
sound
say
like a
this.
layman to experts. I sound like I know nothing because I really don't. I'm a speculative fiction author. And when I need something, I look it up and try to summarize it into a story, which I'm trying to make about humans and, fantastical things. So
Yeah,
really,
but
the
can I tell you
science of this
something? If you can have a host that knows absolutely nothing about your book or about your work or anything like that. And if the person, or you can have somebody who's you've read every single thing you've ever done, and if the person doesn't isn't a good interviewee, there's nothing you can do. So that goes both ways, I think. I think, like big shows like Coast to Coast, they screen people. They don't just have people on there. You have to
Right.
pass a
You have to
test
talk
with
to the
the
producer. Right.
co-producer,
Yeah.
a conversation where they ask you questions because they want to make sure you're not nervous and freezing up or giving one-word answers or being jerky and
Mhm.
redirecting the conversation. I mean, you can
Yeah.
redirect, of course. That's a fine art, the fine art of redirecting. But
But they
uh,
want to know. They don't want a surprise. And when I
yeah.
worked at the Maury Povich show, I didn't produce anything. I was like an audience coordinator, which meant I made people stand in a
Your
serpentine.
what show? I thought you said your puppet show.
No, the Maury Povich show, who the daddy is or
Uh-huh.
whatever.
Yes. Okay.
But I watched them work, from afar. They didn't
Wait,
treat me
you
like I was
worked on
anything.
the Maury Povich show? How
For
have I
like,
known you for a year and not known
it's
this?
not that spectacular. I'll tell you the story.
Yeah.
A
What
higher experience. They hired me to organize their audience, which was basically everybody from the outer boroughs, everybody who bridge and tunneled it into the city for the day, got to sit into the audience. I mean, it was horrible. These people were freaking horrible. Oh my God, they were evil. They were supposed to stop cursing because the cursing was like causing the production to beep out the curse word. So my job was to be a cop and stare them down and tell them not to curse.
Wait,
But
is there
every
like
single
video footage of you doing that?
no, I never made
Probably.
it camera. But
Okay.
if you do watch the video from
Be funny.
2007 in July, you'll see the security guys. They actually had a contract to be on camera. They're a part of the production. But me, I was in the audience staring at people telling them to stop cursing, which I got ignored completely doing.
What a cool experience.
And it was a really cool experience, except for my boss hated my guts. She did not want me to get hired. She passed me from every single person that could say no to me being hired until she had no choice but to hire me. So she treated me like shit from day one until I ended up getting fired for screaming at her and telling her to go screw herself.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was a really. I almost got fired for
You
reading
know what?
Maury Povich. I stole Maury Povich's newspaper accidentally. I stole it off his breakfast tray, and brought it to the stairs and was reading it in between shows. And one of the little producer guys walked by and saw me doing it. Didn't say anything to me, but told on me. It was the most miserable experience. But mainly the point that I saw how they operate. They have producers work these shows from beginning to end. I mean, they do it for weeks, you know, and they want to make sure these people know exactly. They coach them before they even go on camera. So you're going to say this, and then as they're on camera, they're behind the camera talking to them, going, "You're going to take that from her." It's really incredible how produced that show is from beginning to end. The producers have their hands in everything.
That okay, so I just think that is like that's how if you're gonna be working on the Maury Povich show, you can't just have like a amicable parting of ways. You gotta have some kind of like some kind of camera worthy meltdown,
Oh, dude,
dramatic
I told
exit.
her too. I was like, "No, you go fuck yourself. I ain't taking this shit from you.
Wow, wow. You'll
And I
never
didn't get
work in this
fired that
town
day.
again.
My God,
Good, I
she
don't want
looked at
to.
I thought I changed her mind about me, honestly. She got this look on her face and she smiled like we were friends. But in reality, what she had done was get exactly what she wanted because she went to her boss's boss, the scariest, most mafioso looking Italian guy in the entire world, who I have no clue how he had an NBC job, that brought me into his office and fired me. And he's telling me I'm fired. And I think they wanted me to like get freaked out and beg for the job back or something. I said I got pissed off at him and then turned around and almost ran over two girls on my way out the building.
Oh,
So
geez.
that's what I do. I'm very good at getting fired and losing jobs.
We're going out.
If
We're
you don't
going
like
out
me,
proper.
I'm burning this bridge. I know I'm not coming back anyway, so it don't matter. I'm gonna use some gasoline, some napalm. I might play some bombs. There's gonna be
Oh
booby traps
man.
for later.
Oh man.
Yeah, that was my Maury Povich experience. I
That's
really enjoyed it though.
that's marvelous. I feel like you could work that into a novel somehow. Like
I think so too. I mean, I've made eye contact with Maury Povich. He does not look like he has much of a soul. I mean, when you see people have like these dark black eyes, and they just are capable of doing like horrible, horrible things. I think looking at him that he was capable of doing horrible, horrible things.
Oh my god. Oh, I love it.
There's, I mean, we this Me Too movement, we got kind of proof, don't we, that people like that kind of do whatever the hell they want to do until they get caught.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And there's always like I mean, I don't know, you could work it in fictionally too, where there's the expose of one of the characters it's like has to work on this show. I mean, I don't know, are there even shows like that anymore? It's like there was an era when that was just such a thing. You had
Well,
Geraldo
also, like
Rivera
this,
and Maury Povich and yeah,
Maury Povich, and they got the Dr. Drew, right? Dr. something, Dr. Phil.
right,
There's a
right.
few of them.
Dr. Phil. I mean, are those
Dr.
shows still on?
Oz.
I don't watch television, so I
Either.
don't know.
I don't have cable. I wish I had cable. I miss New York One. That's the only thing I miss. They had the best news coverage of New York City. Like if you wanted
Oh, see,
news of New York City, that's the only place to go.
and that is a cable channel.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, you can't get it anywhere else. It's on cable, like channel one. It was the first freaking channel. Yeah, it's the only thing I miss about having cable. It was that dumb channel. Because you can't get, I mean, you can't even go to their website and watch it streaming. Nobody streams it either, like on the pirate sites or the torrent sites. So you cannot find it. You can watch CNN, but who wants CNN? Who cares about
No.
CNN?
You know what I hate about CNN? Again, the whole multitasking thing. Too many things on the screen at once. You got an ad, you got a time, you've got a weather thing, and then you've got that scrolling news thing, and then they're telling you news, and there's pictures behind, and it's just like, I can't handle this. I don't even know what to look at or what to listen to, so I just can't. Like, and it's always on when you go to like an airport.
Yeah.
Oh, CNN is always on, and the airport's already too many bings and boops and things going on.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh my gosh, sensory overload. Let me sit in the corner and stare out the window. Let me find the most outside looking space there is inside and sit there.
Well, in Newark, it all looks the same. It's gray and dirty and polluted. It just looks like it's like it'll
Nothing
kill
to
you.
look at. Nothing to see here, folks.
You're
Just Newark.
worried. You don't know if you're going to get jumped behind any. It's dark. It's dank. I mean, it's horrible. Not
Oh,
actually. You
geez.
know what?
I don't know if I've been to
JFK is actually a worst airport in the history of airports. It's probably just as bad as Chicago. It's nasty.
I think I've been there once on a very brief layover.
Chicago or JFK?
No, Newark.
Newark.
I've been to Newark on a layover. I've never actually been to Newark, and I've been to both Chicago airports, Midway and O'Hare. My Midway is just, I guess, probably nowadays I would appreciate Midway a little bit more because it's smaller, but Midway is pretty dinky and a little bit funky.
Newark. I mean, it's like New York misspelt by somebody with a New Jersey accent. It's like they're
I never
running.
thought about that.
It's like they're running to name it
Newark.
New York. Like the real guy back there, he's, I'm gonna name my city New York, and New York's like, no, I'm gonna do it. And he ran up and said Newark, and they spelled it wrong, and the New York guy got
And then they're stuck with it. Right.
Newark.
Speaking of origins, what'd be fun? What'd be a fun episode to do for Origin, is to talk about some word origins, right? Like how we came from one. I'm not talking about now, but sometime we do an episode because I always like things like that, like how we came to use certain phrases and how we take creative license with certain terms, sometimes incorrectly,
Fascinating subject.
based on what they are, actually meant, what they originally meant to be, or something like that. It's like, okay, that's hilarious. We should just make that the urban myth of how Newark came to be named that.
I mean, honestly, yeah, right. I mean, you can, right?
How
You
else
can
could the
just
name?
make up
Well,
a
what else
story
could the
about
name mean? Like where? I mean, totally. I never thought about it like that, but it's
Newark.
hilarious.
We want your city to be named Newark. How do you want to spell it? I don't know how to spell. I'm from Jersey. How do you spell
Oh.
it?
I believe my editor lives in Jersey, so hopefully she isn't listening to this.
Well, there are good parts of Jersey now. I don't know what they are, but they're good parts of Jersey. Actually, that's not true. We have property in
I got it.
in
I have
Passaic.
to admit my knowledge of the East Coast is very, very poor, and
Oh yeah,
yeah, having grown up on the West Coast.
Jersey is absolutely beautiful. It's incredibly green. Like I look out my window. I'm there now. I'm looking out my window. It's gorgeous. I mean, there are flowers and trees, and it's unbelievable. And then the fall comes, and the trees turn just beautifully orange, and they fall off, and they reveal. this disgusting array of trash that people have thrown out of their
Oh
vehicles.
no, oh
Like
no.
I mean, it's like for 4 months, all you see is styrofoam cups and McDonald's containers and plastic bags and cups and glasses and everything that people throw out of their cars during the summer. But right now, it's freaking beautiful. It is so beautiful. So
Yeah,
beautiful. You can go on
yeah.
trips
Well,
for
I have
9 months.
to
You're
tell
good.
you, I've had a few fall leaves falling off
Me
my
too.
trees in my neighborhood, and
It's happening.
yeah, it's happening
It's
a little
early.
early. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting. It's happening to you too.
I noticed it. Yeah, I'm smelling
Hmm.
it in the air too. I'm smelling the leaves
Right?
start to
Like
die.
last night, I was standing outside and it had rained earlier in the day and the temperature had dropped, but it was not the same kind of like summer. The air didn't feel like summer. It was like, nope, this is
Uh,
crisp fall.
we went to Sesame Place yesterday and froze our
Oh,
asses
how
off.
fun with the
Oh,
with
it
the
was not fun.
twins.
Yeah, it was
Aw.
horrible. It was the worst experience of my life. This is the second time this summer we went. The first time was decidedly better, but it was so packed. We stayed in
Oh,
line for the
really?
first slide for 2 hours. And I'm not 3-year-olds. We have two twin 3-year-olds. So me and my wife both are, we can't trade off. We can't say, here, you take him. He's driving me crazy. We both have a squirming, screaming
Right,
child
right.
begging for something to do other than stand in line.
Oh,
And it
God.
just kept happening. We did like three things, ate a bunch of ice cream and left. It was the worst
So
thing.
that's interesting. I wonder if they will go the way of because now Disneyland and Disney World and stuff, they're advertising that basically they have this um, line system where you essentially you take a number
They
or
have
you
it
get
too.
a time and you just
Yeah.
come back then, and it's so genius because
No,
it
it's very horrible because you have
it
to pay
keeps
$9 a time.
right
Disney,
you yeah,
you
but
could
you don't have that experience of the kids having to wait and just that becomes the domineering the dominant experience from your visit instead of the fun that you had on the actual ride or the family time you had. You just think because kids can't wait in line. Three-year-olds sure
what was your
can't.
amusement park as a kid?
So I grew up in California, so I grew up really in a really rural environment, so I didn't really have an amusement park. I went to Disneyland once when
So
I was
that's your amusement park then?
yeah.
I've never been to Disneyland. I'd like to see it,
Have you
honestly.
been to Disney World?
Hell yeah, I grew up an hour away from it. Could have
Oh,
basically grown up in Disney World.
okay, nice. Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of friends like in my early 20s and stuff that had moved to San Francisco from Southern California, and they totally grew up like going to Disneyland. That was a
Yeah.
really but I've only been once. I mean, I literally grew up without like, we don't, my parents still don't have electricity. So,
What about
I
as
mean,
an
we had a
adult?
Six Flags and like a Great America, which had like at the time it had all the Looney Tunes characters. And
Yeah.
that is still in
Oh,
like the San Jose
okay. Six
area.
Flags is Great America. The same thing?
Yeah, isn't
No,
it?
different. Okay, I don't know. We have a Six Flags here too. I've only been to one. It was in Texas. I think it was the first one.
I thought it was the same thing. Maybe
I
it's
think it is. I
not.
think it is too.
You
I
can
think
tell
it
I'm
is
not a
too.
real amusement park person, as you can tell. So,
Well, no, me either, right? I know Disney World. I know Busch Gardens too, because both of those are near where I grew up. So man, I went to them all the time. Also had a place called Adventure Islands that was a water park, and it was amazing. There were definitely lines to go on stuff, but they moved so ridiculously fast that you never really stood in them. Even when they were on the sidewalk, you still got up to the slide and went incredibly fast. I mean,
well,
it
the
was
bummer
crazy.
thing is for you, I can guess if you went to Sesame Place, but instead of going, if you went in like I don't know, like September after school started or whatever, you probably wouldn't have had quite the crowd,
But they
because
closed, don't they? I mean, that was why we went yesterday. It was Monday. We're like, oh, dude, let's go Monday.
didn't
Nobody's gonna be
school
there
start
Monday.
there? Has school started there yet?
Like 2 weeks, I think. Not this
Huh.
Monday. My kids
Well, you
start
know what though? But
pre-K.
Sesame Place isn't really for school age kids so much. It's really
Oh,
for
younger kids,
toddlers
yeah.
and stuff. So there's all the other end of summer parents who are just like, we got to take our kids somewhere to do something, and everybody's just like, summer
That's exactly
meltdown.
what I said. And you know when I said it? While we were in the car an hour to get there, I said it when we got off the interstate and there was traffic. I was like, oh my God, everybody is going to Sesame Place because everybody who's going to Sesame Place has 3-year-olds and they have nothing to
Right,
do because daddy works in a hospital or whatever.
right.
So we're going to end up in a freaking line from hell for everything. And that's exactly what happened. It was really sucky. It's probably going to be the last time we go, but which sucks. Have you ever been to Great Wolf Lodge or something like that?
Yes,
Have
yes,
you? Is it awesome?
yeah.
She wants to go.
Yeah, it's totally set up for parents just as much as it is for kids because everywhere you go, are you a drinker?
No.
Okay. Well, then you might not might not fully appreciate. So when I went, yeah, there you can basically there's just a lot of ways for parents to do things with kids. There's no lines. There's
Well,
low
see, that's
amusement
what I don't
park.
want.
There's a
I love
room, you
hanging
go
out
up
with
to
my
your
children.
room and chill out, and there's, like, a water park, and, it can get crowded, but you might wait in line to do, like, a couple of things, like the bigger kinda like water slides and things, but overall and then the other thing is there's multiple things to do. There's an arcade, there's, like, a little kind of adventure thing, but there's also the rooms were really nice. The one I stayed in, the rooms were totally nice, the beds were super comfortable, it was totally chill, and, you could do great like, they have this, you can just do room service and at the end of the night, and it's pretty cool. So it's set up for parents to do stuff with kids specifically, with the idea of everybody doing things together rather than some of the place, maybe Sesame Place is a little bit more like it's set up for the kids and the parents tag along. I think the Great
Yeah,
Wolf Lodge is like really family, like it's varying ages. Now they're a little young,
yeah, they are.
so some of the things they would I mean, there is a whole, like, like, this crazy, like, splash fountain thing where you and your wife could just, like, chill right on the edge of it with well within eyeshot of them, and they could play right there. But I think they're a little young for a lot of the other things, so that's just something to, think about.
There's definitely an absence of stuff like that. If
Oh,
you,
and they will fall asleep hard by the end of that.
oh
That's
yeah,
part of Great Wolf Lodge is that your kids sleep so hard.
my daughter was so grumpy yesterday. She was screaming about her having her wet shoes on in the car.
Oh
She wanted
god.
her wet shoes on in the car so bad, and that led to my wife almost giving her a cookie before she had her dinner. And
I know, it's like a Band-Aid, it's a stopgap measure. Just give her the cookie.
don't set the precedent. No, it's horrible. I'm looking forward to another age where this is where they have more control over their emotions. Because man, when they get upset, everybody knows about it. I guess that's good, right? Because they know that they can voice their frustration and get something out of it,
Yeah,
and
I
maybe
mean,
it's
you don't wanna
bad. I don't know.
repress that too much because you're gonna you'll miss out.
Miss
The
out
pro
on
well,
communication later on down the road.
yeah,
They
and
won't want to
just
tell you
letting them
stuff.
well, and you have to take into account, right, like, they don't have they can't have a discourse and talk to their parents about all of their emotions. They're just, like, feeling it right there in the moment. And
Yeah.
so you have to I mean, you can encourage them to talk and stuff like that, but you can't. I mean, if you repress that emotion, then with that comes all of those spontaneous hugs and, laughter and all of the wonderful things that they have with their emotions right there on their sleeves.
Oh man, it
So
gets tough though after a whole day of it.
I think the hardest age for me with my son was like 3 and 4. So
Yeah, that's where
far.
we're at. That's where
Yeah.
we're at, right in the
Nothing
middle of three.
people always say, I don't even know why they say the terrible twos. They're so little
Three's
at 2.
awesome. Oh my
The
god, I
2
miss it so much. I was
Yes.
seriously, I'm like, this can't get worse. I mean, they're basically they're light. They're like 30 pounds. Now they're
Exactly. You can tote them around everywhere.
I mean, you can pick them up. I mean, they're still pretty light now, but now my son knows how to punch somehow, I guess,
Do
from
you have a so
superhero
you
cartoon.
have a boy and a girl?
Yeah.
Oh my.
And it's miserable for the little girl, unfortunately. He picks on her like you would not believe. I'll be making dinner and I'll turn around and she's just screaming with him on top of her, just laughing his little ass off. He has, like I said, learned to punch and kick from superhero cartoons, and there's no turning back on that either, unfortunately. Just separating him is my job. That's all I do.
Referee. Referee
Referee.
for yeah.
Trying my hardest to get my daughter to remain calm for more than an hour. So yeah, there's a boy and a girl. They're awesome. I really can't wait for them to actually have conversations. But man, I can't believe how much the superhero thing is like trickled down. You can't even like turn on YouTube anymore without them seeing like a superhero thing to watch.
Yeah, I'm really, really restrictive about technology and how much I even use technology in front of my son.
Interesting.
Even a lot of those games, just like stupid Scrabble, there's pop-up ads, and it's really annoying. It's really frustrating because I don't. I don't feel that those things are safe or appropriate most of the time. And here you're
most of the
talking
time.
about a lady who makes her living scaring people, right? But there's
No, you're
spooky
100%
scary,
correct.
and
I mean,
then
you have to be very
there's
careful about what they.
consumer scary. Yeah. I mean, remember when we were kids and there's Saturday morning cartoons, and that's when all the toy commercials would come on, slip and slide and all these like
That's why they
epic things.
existed, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they were crap cartoons made specifically so that you would hang around for 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday morning to get inundated by cereal commercials and
Don't you
toy
badmouth
commercials.
Smurfs.
Man, it was badass. I want to watch them. My
I
kids
love
won't
the
watch them.
Smurfs. I know. I don't know if
They're
I could
so
watch them
bad.
today.
My children won't watch them at 3 years old. But then they like stuff like Paw Patrols and stuff like that. My theory, and I don't even know if this is apt, because I mean we are every day changing in our society based on technology, right? I mean schools are to train you to be able to sit in place for longer than 6 hours at a time so you can do a job, right? If you don't at the end of 12 years climatize yourself to that, you're gonna have a miserable life because you're not gonna be able to hold down a job very well, right? And I feel like technology is the same. If you get them used to it early, it's not a big deal later on. And
I
I
think
don't
that
know.
there's a whole generation,
I don't even know what's going to
younger than
happen to
us
them.
that are now in their 20s, and to them, because they did grow up mostly with technology, it's not as big of a deal.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
they've got
almost
some
it's like
interesting
you put it in front of
ideas.
them. But I think that there's people like us who didn't grow up like that, and so we have this struggle, and that struggle transfers to our children and what's okay and what's not okay. So,
No, I think we're both in our 30s, right? I'm in my
oh,
young
that's so
30s.
nice. No, I'm
Okay.
I'm not in my 30s anymore.
No, I'm actually 41. I just wanted to be nice before I asked you how old.
Oh, yeah, I'm 40, I'm 32, yeah.
You're 32.
No.
Excellent. My wife is 33. So I mean, we're all around the same 30
Yeah.
range.
No, I'm actually 40, in my 40s.
You're 40. I
And
mean, it all
I'll
depends on
leave
what
it
you
at
call.
that.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get into specifics because obviously that'll make you uncomfortable. But I mean, in terms of like when you specifically were born, will depend on how exactly you feel about technology. In terms of Twitter,
Totally.
your attitude about Twitter is interesting because my wife's attitude about Twitter is very similar. So I mean, that she doesn't see it as being an interesting anything. It's just like annoying little all the time
It's
flowy
just a
thing.
way for people to annoy other people.
She doesn't play with it. She doesn't really play with Facebook either. If somebody annoys her, she cuts them from her list of 84 friends. You know what I mean? It's like she doesn't
Oh.
care.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, you should see my blocked people's list. It's
Yeah,
long.
say something about a race that she doesn't appreciate. She's gonna block you.
Yep, of course. Of course. She and I think I would get along very well with her.
I honestly think that you would be really good friends with her.
That's awesome.
Probably one of the reasons I get along with you so well is that you remind me of her in terms of your ability to be very confident. She's a very confident woman too. I like
Nice.
that.
Thank
I
you.
like.
That's a nice compliment.
I mean, I hate people that are worried all the time, and she's
I
been in a
know.
world that's very very scary. She's on Wall Street, so it's like
Wow.
she has to deal with some big
She's made of
time fucking
steel.
assholes. What's
Yeah, and
that?
that but that explains why she's able to kind of like, she's already got to deal with all these jerks
Hmm.
in her working
She's
life, so
not.
why
Yeah,
deal with them in her personal life? Why bother wasting your time reading what some jerk said on Twitter when you can just
you're living
chill?
jerk. You're living jerk, basically. I mean, every day for her is living jerk.
Right,
Uh,
right. Yeah, so she needs
she
some
sees so
like
much example of that.
barriers.
It's like, hey, my kid needs braces, but I saw this deal on a Porsche. I couldn't pass it up.
Oh
I mean, people
god.
are just complete assholes. But anyway,
That's a
my
whole
point,
other that's a
my
whole
point
other
being, I mean, you followed. I was born in '76.
Okay.
Perfect to have my foot in the analog world of where's the phone book and the digital world of just look it up online. Why are you asking me
Yeah.
dumb
Yeah,
questions?
yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I mean?
Our generation, and I'm in the same generation, our generation is probably the most split about it. Because I think even, generations older than us, they're a little bit more, like, accepting of it, like, "Oh, look how cool, look at all the things we can do and how quickly we can communicate with our grandchildren," and things like that. And then our generation is kinda like, well, part of us wants a record player, and the other part of us just wants to download the whole thing so we can listen to it while we're walking, right? It's like we can't decide what we want, so we want both things, and then that can get complicated.
I'm a content creator, very concerned about feeding his family and paying a mortgage, but at the same time don't want to pay for anything. Don't give a shit about paying you $5 for your book because I can get it for free over there. And it's like it's very interesting. And I wonder what we can make of that. And unfortunately, what we're making of that is everybody's working for free. and there's artists all over the place, and everybody's creating, and everybody has a voice, and there's communication all over the place, and communities are springing up all over the place where, there's a person on top of it that you kind of look at for your guidance creatively. But nobody's making any money, right? I don't think so.
Yeah,
Unless you're
see,
like a somewhat cute girl. I think.
well, one of the questions that actually kind of just along those lines, but I had this really nice interview with a man who's actually in my book. His name is Jeff Bellinger, and he's written a ton. He's super prolific. He has this amazing podcast called New England Legends. He hosts shows on PBS. I mean, he's just a really, really awesome guy, and very supportive of his fellow writers, and just really interested in folklore and history and hauntings. And we did this lovely sort of written interview for his website, Ghost Village. And one of the questions he asked me, and he asked these questions, it actually took me a few days to write the answers, because they weren't just like, I wanted to be thoughtful and careful with the way that I responded, because I had so many emotions and thoughts when he asked these questions. Well, that's a good interviewer. But anyway, one of the questions he asked is, of course, this is all in the umbrella of paranormal, and what did I see the world, you know, do I see the changes in the world as a positive? There's that we're inundated with ghost stories on the internet and television, and does this take away from the authentic stories, or what did I think? I forget the exact question.
Yeah.
And I thought about that for a while, because and I'm very much like you said, this is what made me think of it as the two feet, 1 foot in one world, 1 foot in the other world. And on the one hand, it gives voice to creativity, like sort of
Oh
the
yeah.
internet world. There's voice to creativity for people who don't have to
Didn't
have a
have one
traditional
before,
publisher.
right?
What's
Because
that?
think about it. That my thought was, you had 3 channels like 30 years ago, right? Maybe there were a few more. Maybe there was 44, but there were people that those channels said, okay, now you're our mouthpiece, and that's the person that you listen to, right? You didn't have
Right.
much choice to variate from what they were
Right. So
saying.
that's the positive. Like, that's the glass half full scenario it's like, okay, first of all, you giving voice to people who wouldn't have had a voice otherwise, and you have this like shared experience. So it's very positive.
Yeah.
On the glass half empty side, a lot of it is crap. And so
A
there's
lot
no
of it is
curation. And
emotionally
what we
too,
had years ago was more curation. The curation is up to the
yeah.
individual, what they're
And
willing
now
to
it's up
see
for
and
the
willing to read. And there are a
back in
lot
the
of
day, it was committee, wasn't it? I mean, you had Channel 8, and Channel 8 got together and said, to this year, we're going to curate this. And this is allowed,
exactly.
and this isn't allowed. And the FCC is leaning on our necks about saying this, and we're not going to say anything about that political movement. And, fuck these people over there. They can starve to death. We don't really give a shit. That's the platform. You know what I mean? Silence. We're going to talk about the good stuff.
Right,
Hey,
and so I
why
think there is
Christmas
curation
tree in
out there
Times Square?
yeah, I think there
You
is
know what I
curation
mean?
out
There's
there still.
Thanksgiving. The president is going to the troops, and he's going to be eating Thanksgiving with the 101st this year or something along those lines. But you don't get the hardcore truth that we get. I mean, I don't know. It's really fantastic.
See, I think
It's
that
really
started
fantastic.
changing in the '60s. I think that that's when media really started changing, because during the
Tightening
Vietnam
down.
War, the real images started coming back thanks to
Yeah.
reporters who wouldn't stick within they didn't follow the script. And that
It
changed
was
our entire
Nixon.
relationship with
Yeah,
technology and knowledge
totally.
and who we could trust.
Totally. I think
So,
Nixon gave control to the corporations in 1968, 1970, something along those lines. I think that was the whole point behind Nixon. And once
right.
he gave the corporations the ability to create the narrative, maybe he tried to turn back, and look what happened to him. People have been being run over by corporate America forever. And nowadays, you can basically skirt them. I read the most interesting thing about a woman who was murdered potentially or committed suicide in Iraq. She was with my old unit. I wasn't there, obviously. I was out for many, many years, but um, the news is quiet about all of the stuff that happened to her. You know what I mean? They say suicide. That's it. You look on Wikipedia, they say
Mhm.
suicide. But if you dig, a lot more stuff happened to her physically than actually means suicide in terms of medical examiners, independent or whatever. Nobody's saying anything. The United
Well,
States
we just have
military,
all of
my
the
point
things.
though,
Yeah,
my
I
point though
mean,
is that the United States military threatened magazines and major corporations with pulling advertising dollars.
hmm.
I won't fund your magazine anymore if you print stories about this woman's death. And there are no stories about that woman's death.
Well, and it doesn't it make you just think how many times that's like how common that is.
Exactly.
And see, that is back to my argument of what I always say this to you. You cannot trust Wikipedia. That is not a valid source.
No, no, it's not a valid source, but you can look for Swiss cheese. And it's funny how you can find Swiss cheese in these articles. I mean, they're all over the place. Here, you can look at
Right.
this information,
It's
but
like, I'm
wait,
about to
that
well,
information
okay, so that
that
happens
led to a
all the
question
time.
that
That
there's no
happens to
answer
me
for.
quite frequently when I'm
Yeah.
researching a book or writing a book or people are telling me their stories. I always, sometimes, and I don't include everything I hear and I don't republish everything that people tell me because sometimes I get these stories that are just not, I can tell there are holes in the story and that the person is either telling me because they want to please me
Yeah.
or which is not necessarily because they want to please me as an individual, but it's a natural human response to like tell the person what you think they want to hear.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually
And
want
on
to ask
top
you a
of that, especially when you're researching things like paranormal and folklore, there's a lot of conspiracy theories. There's a lot of things that overlap, and you have to learn to weed that out, which is why I never rely 100% on something I've looked up online. I look for, and the best part about Wikipedia are the sources at the bottom. I have gotten tips from Wikipedia. I have been able to find books that I should read on the topic. That can be that's one thing I do like about it is that it has to be sourced. So at the bottom
Yeah,
you'll actually get a recommended reading list.
I know
But
it's awesome. My thing is I love conspiracies.
oh, there you go. So you
So
are
if if you tell me somebody's awesome, I'm gonna go, huh? Let's find out
right.
what those demons really are. It's really interesting. I wanted to ask you because you're an interviewer too. I discovered recently two questions that somebody suggested that you ask in every single interview, and I want to ask you specifically. What do you find the most difficult in trying to pull information from people that you're talking to?
Um,
What's the most difficult thing about it for you as a person, as an individual, as the interviewer that you constantly just run
Probably
into?
shutting off the part of me that isn't believing what they're saying or wants
Oh, the
to
skeptic.
yeah, it's probably like that in terms of an interviewer. I mean, I find for one thing the people that I have interviewed, I really enjoy just hearing them. So believe it or not, as much of a talker that I am in the interview chair, I'm very capable of shutting up and listening. And I like that because most of my life is the opposite. And so I do like being able to be in these
Oh, that's
confines.
fascinating.
But I
I'm the
think
exact
probably
opposite.
instead of analyzing what they're saying,
Yeah.
it's the ability to listen, and that's something that,
But
we
I
all
mean,
can work on.
that's interesting because you're the exact opposite problem that I have. I don't have the ability to shut up. Huh, at all. Everything you say elicits some kind of emotional response from my brain saying, stop her and say something instead. I want to tell you my stories, and that's bad. That's a horrible interview technique. Like this lady said, stop it. If you have an idea that you want to tell a story, just it's not important. Shut the fuck up and let that person continue talking. But it's all ego driven, right? I mean, you have to have the ability to stop and listen.
Well, one thing that I do, and I think it's a little different for you because you like to have these kind of discourses, but with the interviews that I've done, I first of all, the person is like, obviously, like I've chosen that person, and there's a reason, and so I always have questions that I want to ask. Not that I'm getting suggested interview questions from them. I just get a bio from them,
Yeah.
but I write down like, what do I want to ask? Because, for example, I had this awesome interview with this guy he's the curator of the pharmacology museum, the Museum of Pharmacy at the
Where is that?
University of Arizona.
Oh man.
And they had all these weird things in their collection. So I had read about a few things. I didn't want to ask all the questions that probably other people had asked, but we ended up talking about, so I have a bottle collection and I have a few people have given me poison bottles because they have like skeletons on them, skull and crossbones. And we started talking about that. And he said, do your poison bottles, are they triangular? And I said, actually, yeah, one of them is totally triangular. And he said, and does the other one have ridges on the side? I said, well, yes, it does. And he said that the reason they would do that is if you were sick and you couldn't see and you were
Blind.
grabbing
Oh
a
yeah.
bottle, you would feel the raised skeleton. You would feel that the bottle was a different shape, or you would feel the ridges on the side. And I had no idea, and I've collected
It's so
bottles almost my whole
fascinating.
life, so it was really cool because I put in mind just to bring up poison bottles because that was something I like, and, so I actually kind of create a bit of a script for myself, and that helps keep me on track in terms of being the interviewer, and because of that, I wanna know the answers, so I'm able to kind of shut off um,
So it's like a great
myself.
blog post, honestly. The idea of behind the shape of bottles and apothecary or
I
like
know, it's so
stuff
cool. It
like
was just
that,
like
right?
and I mean, and that's the whole thing is, like, I love learning and I occasionally when I'm being interviewed, I'll turn the questions on the interviewer, like, I'll ask them because I remember I was on the last time I was on Coast to Coast, every time I've been on Coast to Coast, I know that George Norrie doesn't like Ouija boards, and something has come up where he doesn't like Ouija boards, and I've always been dying all these years to ask him why, and so somehow I was able to ask him where we had enough time where he gave his answer, and it was really cool, and it was just so cool to have him tell me this story and kind of go off script a little bit and get that answer. So, that's totally, like, not really the answer to your question, but just to answer your question, I think the biggest
No,
challenge
it was. It was a answer to my question. I mean,
it's to stop
ultimately,
yourself and to turn off your skeptic
ruining
and your
things.
and just let the person answer and actually listen to what they're,
I
listen
would
to that
agree. I mean,
answer.
ultimately, I don't do that, right? I mean, I try to let the person talk and not. I just assume you're smarter than me. I just assume it. I assume I'm an idiot and I don't know anything. And I'm here completely to get schooled by you. That's how I enter every single interview. And also, I always enter every single interview with a tremendous amount of reluctance. Like before I send that
I
link,
know, right? It's like, "Oh, you really wanna do this again?"
fuck, why did you ask? God damn it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, oh, okay, maybe they're going to cancel. Maybe they won't answer. Like,
You
let,
told you
let
told me
me.
that once, you're like, "I basically, every interview, I live with, like, the hope that the person's gonna cancel." Like, it's actually Okay, so what's the second question? Because that was the
The
first
second
question.
question is I wrote them down and now I can't read my writing. So let me get, oh, yeah. So, what matters the most when you interview somebody?
When you
When you
interview
sit down the interview, what is it that makes you the happy? When you get to the end of the interview, if you get this thing, are you? What is this thing that you get that makes you the happiest, or makes you feel most successful about that particular interview? I mean, I don't know. Let's turn it over to books and writing too. What's most important? What's the thing that matters most to you? Why do you create? Why do these interviews? Why write these books? Right? Why do your short stories?
So, in terms of like interviewing somebody else, or even being interviewed by somebody else, kind of like what I said with George Norrie, it was like where you find this connection with that person and you can share an experience of, telling stories and,
Wait, you're
um,
saying that you don't have a connection? This isn't special between me and you?
oh no, this
You
is
can connect with other
completely
people?
special. This is completely, no,
Thank you. I
you
thought
are the
so.
only person I connect to
Thank
like
you.
this. I
Whew.
promise you.
I was very, very upset there for a second.
But
Jealous,
I
was all over
think
the place.
so one of the how like for me, how I know that it was a successful interview, as an interviewer or as an interviewee, I think it's that um, so as an interviewer, the feeling that one, I treated my guest with the utmost respect of their time and that I took the time to think of a way to showcase them and make them feel good because the best interviews that I have had, and I'm not saying I'm waiting for somebody to flatter me the whole time, but
Yeah.
it's when people have treated me with a great deal of respect for my time, et cetera, et cetera. um, and you give the person a chance to talk about something that means something to them. So, for example, with Seth Breedlove, he really, he did not need to take the time to talk to me. He really had a lot of other things going on, but
Yeah.
he did. And so for me, I felt that was a successful interview because I had actually watched his films and was a real admirer of his. And I wanted him to know that and like not didn't need to come across as a fangirl, but I wanted him to know that I thought it was a really like what he did was really beautiful and good and that, somebody appreciated it. So for me, it's just finding the reason that I'm interviewing them and kind of, holding that up and making the person who is the subject letting them know that I have respect for them and I appreciate them. We are kindred in that way that I get it. There's another person out there that gets it. Um, So that's, that's one thing for me as an interviewer. And as a writer, I think what I'm trying to do is tell a story with a series of stories. And if I'm successful in that, I know because people buy the book and they
Yeah.
listen to the interview. So it's a little more concrete, right? Like, but I think as long as I'm proud of the work in itself, if I consider it something I would pay money for, I feel that that's a success, even if the book sales aren't tremendous. And I am lucky because I have, a great relationship with my publisher, and every book that they've done aesthetically has been incredibly
Oh man, I
pleasing.
will tell you 100%. I agree. Your books are beautiful.
They're beautiful.
I like holding them. I mean, when I took them out of the box, that was one of the first things I noticed. They're actually, I'm picking up one now. I'm picking up Paranormal Parlor.
Oh yeah, me too. Wait, what page you on?
I'm not even on a
No,
page.
randomly choose a page. Let's see if we randomly choose the same page. Ready? One, two, three, go.
89.
156. Oh well.
I have a coffin on my page. What do you have on
Ooh,
yours?
I have an alien and
156.
Aleister Crowley, so
This is like the most. This is the book I want as a kid, right? This is the book I checked out
exactly. That's
of the library every single time I went to the library. I always ended up
yes.
with another copy of this book. I
This
love
is
these books,
this
man. I
is
can't wait for my kid to
Ripley's
buy
Believe It
these.
or Not meets Tales from the Crypt meets, the an encyclopedia meets Guinness Book of World Records. I mean,
That's
that's
awesome.
always what I set out to create with the first couple of trivia, Book of the Bizarre and Beyond Bizarre. And then the book like Paranormal Parlor, I mean, I think for me, I feel really good that there's something beautiful to behold and that it contributes to the fine art of writing and, books and literacy.
This is beautiful.
Whether
Yeah,
I
man.
sell enough copies to make more than $100 a year, that remains to be seen. But I feel very proud of what I've created. And I think as long as I've been authentic and put myself into it and put things in the book that I feel good about and that I feel that I have researched adequately, and, there might be mistakes. You could argue with things, but they're my books. So I get to write them the way I want. And and people can choose whether or not they want to read them. And it's very, very gratifying. I said, don't read the comments, but it's very gratifying when you write something and somebody tells you that they actually enjoyed it and it's something that they would want and they get it. And so I think what I'm looking for when I interview somebody is the same thing that I'm looking for when somebody interviews me. And there's a certain amount of validation that we're on the same boat, we're in the ship together and we're sailing in the right direction, even when all the other crazy things get in the way. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this conversation has been a lot to do with writing, right? And dedication and finding kind of that thread to pull to get you through it, right? Because I mean, man, motivation sometimes is hard, pressed.
It is, and I mean, absolutely, a deadline is always very motivating for me. That's my biggest
And that
motivation.
really is awesome that you said that because I was going to say, me and you work in that same way. If there is something looming there, I have to get this done by this
Oh
date,
god, and that's when you go into full panic mode too,
and
like
I
3
get it
days
done
before your
though.
deadline, you're up every night till 3 in the morning, you're sweating, you're angry, you're wondering why you chose to do this, you're mad at the publisher, you're mad at yourself, you're mad at your family. I mean, you're just like in
I
shutdown.
promise, man. That's all it takes. See, people say they have writer's block, and I'm thinking to myself, how do you have writer's block? Dedicate yourself to a moment later on in your life that you're going to have something produced by. And if you can't dedicate yourself to that, then find
Oh,
something
no,
to dedicate
self-imposed
yourself.
deadlines? Mm-mm, I cannot.
No, I'm saying
Self-imposed
something
deadlines don't work.
make a promise to more than just one person, right? I mean, my fiction comes from the idea that if I don't produce this fiction, then the person out there who wants to read my fiction will be disappointed. And there might be that one person that's been following me for 20 freaking years. I'll just go ahead and consider them
See,
the
okay, so
ghost.
that's actually different for me. I don't write because I want, that one person to read. I write because I I want to be able to read it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Oh, yuck. No, man. I'm my
and
least
that's
favorite writer.
something I just said this to somebody, I think yesterday. I said, if you have writer's block, and you're worried so much about, it really inhibits the creative process if you worry, at least for me, if I worry about what somebody is going to think when they read it. I obviously I want that if I'm under
That
contract and I
inhibits
have,
you?
That is not my
That
issue.
stops you in your tracks. You have a hard time with that person looming in front of you.
No, I do not have a person looming in front of me, ever. The person
You have
looming is
an
me.
editor.
Nope.
You are behind you though. I'm behind me. I'm trying. Man, when I did this. I tweeted this once. So I'm really kind of quoting myself. I I'm such an asshole. Anyway, what I said was,
This was
I
great
said I
quote.
write I
Hold
write
on, hold on, hold
with
on. This
the
is me. Hold on. Okay, what's your quote?
my quote. You're writing it down. Good. Are you ready? Okay.
Yeah, ready.
I write with the worst criticism chasing me every step I take, every word I write, every sentence I put down. I just have somebody behind me going, "Really, asshole? Really? That sucks. Really? No, 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 no,
Okay,
no."
so I don't have that problem.
And it's usually the asshole in my creative writing class, or some jerk off that sneer when I was reading a story aloud during my theater days or whatever. It's like somebody that I know specifically will never get my shit. I'm writing for them because everything I do wrong, they're gonna laugh at, and I don't want them to laugh.
Yeah,
So
so I don't have that problem. And I do think that's a common problem. I do not have that problem. And my advice to people who have, aren't sure or feeling, like not confident in their writing or feel like they have writer's block is 100%. Now, obviously, you got to write to get paid to a certain extent, but 100%, if you're creating something, it should be something that you want to read or write. So, for example, all the books that I've created are all books that I want. They're books that I want to pull off the shelf. They're ideas that are interesting to me as an
yeah, but you
artist.
don't write in a vacuum though either. You write for your editor who edits for you, who you then rewrite for your editor, and
Not
both of you are
exactly.
working in tandem for the audience to appreciate a
Right,
product.
right, but it's what I like. If they ask me to write something that I couldn't write, or if they said, "Well, what about this idea?" or whatever, I would probably say no because I want to write. It's my idea, so I want to write something that I feel good about, and I don't. I
Well, I
know
see. You want it to
actually,
be your idea, obviously.
right, but I know when it goes to my publisher I actually don't live in fear of criticism. I'm fine with it being, edited and pulled apart to a
Mm.
certain extent. But again, I have a really good relationship with the people that I work with, and that's something that but it's always been that way. It's like, "Yeah, this works. No, this doesn't work." So there has been a collaboration there that I know when I send them something, they're not going to butcher it or ruin it or, they're only gonna
Yeah,
make it better.
only make it
And
better
so
or make you better, right? I mean,
yeah,
ultimately, that's
and
the
they
end of
have. I mean,
the
the just by
situation.
the cover and the way that the books are designed, it makes a better package than, just a straight
Oh man,
manuscript.
something
So,
came to mind just now. Do you ever read Zen and the Art of Archery?
I read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance,
Beautiful book. My God, I love that book so much.
but
That
never
book is
Zen
my
and the
book.
Art. Yeah.
The Zen of the Art of Archery is about a guy who goes to Japan and he's basically taking archery classes. And it's a very short book. It's like 80 pages, something like that. And I guess in Japan, they have some, everything in Japan is kind of this mystic thing that you have steps to accomplish the task. If you ever watched, what's that sushi movie? You, you know what I'm talking about? Jiro
Sushi?
Dreams of Sushi?
No.
No, well, I mean, basically everything is very, very regimented. And this archery is the same way. If you go over there and you try to string this bow, I'm going to take this bow and string it, you can't do it. You will never be able to do it, no matter how strong you are, no matter how capable you think you are. You're never stringing this bow, not in a million years, unless you learn every single moment. I mean, we're talking about intricate twists of your tendons and your ankle to get this thing to fasten, and it's an art basically, and it's a zen. You have to meditate to get this thing to fasten. It's so ridiculous, but I mean, it's like, and back in the day, Japanese archers were technologically elite. But what's my point?
I'm not sure. I'm just trying to follow you here, buddy.
What were we talking about before I even started this horrible monologue?
Being afraid of publishers or what somebody creates together or collaboration.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess ultimately what I'm trying to say is that your process is you're bending to that will of what's necessary. I don't know what my point was. I got totally lost. You should read that book regardless. Zen and the Art
Okay,
of
I,
Archery.
I wrote it down. I wrote it
it's
down. I'd
it's
never heard of
very,
it.
very, it's a very, very quick read. Hopefully my mind returns to the moment that I started tell it, because there's a point that I wanted to make. But anyway, the conversation is in your hands. I leave it to you.
Yeah. Well, I think I probably got to wrap it up.
Yeah. I
And I
will
don't
cut
know
this
at what
last part
point.
out completely.
Yeah, I know
Actually,
we
yeah.
went in a lot of tangents because we do just sort of like to have conversations like a couple of old friends over coffee. So I know that we didn't stay completely on the creative track. We talked about kids and Sesame Place and all that kind of stuff. But overall, I think just I guess the only other thing I would say, and I was tried to kind of emphasize the other night to somebody on an interview, is that when you are writing, you have to be true to what you think is the best thing you can write in your own vision, and you can't get caught up in the what happens when the publisher sees this. Will a publisher publish this? Now you can get caught up in that after you've finished or you've created something. Of course, every writer does. But just like an artist, I mean, you can take commissions, but it's always you have to be able to unleash you can't unleash creativity within confines. And so
No.
if you create your own confines, then you can foster your creative process. But if you create confines, imaginary confines that keep you from, like, if you're constantly writing for somebody, it sounds ridiculous, but if you're always writing for somebody, for the reader, if you're always writing for the reader, then you can't write. You have to write for yourself.
Oh, yeah,
Even
absolutely.
though the ultimate it's ironic because the ultimate goal is for any writer is to be read.
Critic.
So that's the ultimate goal, and you
Readers are
can't you
the
can't
wish,
diverge
aren't
from
they?
that. But the readers are critical, they're everything.
Yeah, well,
And
that's what
so
you
what
want.
and you
But
can't go back.
everybody's a critic, though, too.
So in
That's
the
what I'm writing for, is those
right.
horrible critics. The ones that
And the
are
same
going to
with
say
book
the nasty comment. What are they going to say? I want to know what it is before I give it to them. Can I help it? Can I not help it? I mean, it's just, it's very, you really do. You can't write outside your own
I
background.
actually have
You
gotten a
can't.
lot of nasty comments over the years, and you just learn to let them roll off
Thick
you,
skin, yeah.
because if you stand by what you created, then that's your armor.
It's very interesting. I wondered, while you were talking, I thought about George Norrie. I wonder if he gets the sense that he's in a bubble that he can't get out of. I mean, if all of his stuff is pre-produced and they're going to say this and you can counter with that,
Oh, I
does he
don't think
have it?
his no, no, no. He's a diverger from the script. He always
Oh,
diverges from the script. He
don't you
is
worry though, in his case, that if you diverge too far, you're going to expose the
no,
person that you're
he's a
talking to?
very, very, very good interviewer. He's probably one of the best interviewers that I have ever had, because he's a consummate professional. He knows how to cut people off. And not only that, but he knows how to cut the crazies off without humiliating them, which is
Yeah,
amazing,
exactly.
because he
That's
gets
going
some
to be so hard.
crazy calls, and
Yeah.
he really does. And so I think he diverges from the script quite a lot. I think that, a script exists because he also interviews people, 6 days a week, almost every day of every
Yeah.
week of the year. And so there's no way you can possibly consume every single book and every single thing, but the topic, and it's interesting to you. And so he does his research and but he's also just such a good interviewer that he listens, and then his next question is often based on what you said. He doesn't keep bouncing back to the script. And I
Yeah.
think in that way, he's pretty amazing. And I think he's very underrated. He gets a lot of criticism,
He's
a
not
lot.
underrated. He's invisible. He's in a world that doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. He needs to be on podcasts. He needs to be on the internet more. I would listen to him in a heartbeat. He would be the first podcast I go to if I had a new episode. But where is he? He's on the
No,
radio.
I really
Who
want
the
to
hell
interview
listens to
him.
the radio?
I really want to have an interview with him. Actually, I have something coming up with him, which is very interesting. I've never been asked to do this before, and it's a fairly new thing, but it's some kind of web-based, I think it's like a chat room where I join George Norrie in this chat room during the specific amount of time,
Yeah.
and people can send us questions and we reply. And I've never done that before. And it's kind of a new thing with Coast to Coast. I think it's new. I had never heard of it, but maybe they have been doing it for a while. Anyway, I was invited to do that on September 11th. So that should be really fun, because that is a totally different environment than being on a produced radio show that has commercial breaks and things like that. Like, I think that's like a free for all and anyone can join. So it should be pretty interesting.
Would you want to be a George Norrie? I know we got to wrap this up. You already told me that we're running out of time, but just my last couple questions. Would you want to be a George Norrie? Would you want to be? I mean, your fucking name is so awesome, Varla Ventura. I just want you to interview people. I just want you to talk to people.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the idea of doing the podcast, actually, I don't think I ever would have come up with that idea on my own. It was actually my former producer who had a radio show years ago and asked me to be his new co-host, and then we decided that that wasn't a good idea, that we should just create our own.
Yeah,
And
you
he
really
was like,
should.
I want it to be yours, and then I'll just help you produce it. And if he hadn't kind of pushed me toward that, I would have probably never gone to that side of things. But it turns out I really enjoy it, and I love the idea of traveling around the states, interviewing people about things that are weird and unusual. And it's not just paranormal ghost stories, it's not just people who, do certain things. It's all manner of things that are strange and odd and unusual. So, like, for example, I have a woman who has a Victorian hair museum. She's on my wish list of people to interview, just right alongside, somebody like Jeff Bellinger, who is such an amazing writer and ghost hunter and folklorist. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, could I ever make enough money to
No,
just do that?
no.
Probably not.
I mean, people do though, right? I mean, Joe Rogan actually makes millions of dollars a year.
Right. I mean, I'll tell you,
Podcasters
I'd
make
way
millions of
rather,
dollars a year.
obviously, I way rather be known as a writer, but I think above that, in terms of
But
like
he'd
that sort
way
of
rather be known
entertainment
as a
industry.
comedian, right? I mean, these people aren't just, I'm
Right.
not a podcaster. This is bullshit,
Right.
right? And I'm off, I would offer, oh my God, I think you deserve it. I think this would be so fantastic. I would produce it for you. I think this would be so simple. And the only question is, do you have the energy to do it? Do you
Yeah,
want to
that's
do
a
it?
good
How long do
question.
you want to do it? What do you want to actually do? I mean, it would
Yeah.
have to be often. You would have to at least do an episode a week.
Yeah.
We could dedicate Tuesdays at 11 o'clock my time for the recording of an hour conversation between you and whoever you want to talk to. And I would just run it the way I run my podcast. I would set up the interviews for you, or you would set up the interviews for yourself. You would send the email, you'd put them in the schedule, and then you talk to people on Tuesday from 11 o'clock to noon.
Right. Well, let's talk offline about that, because I can tell you
I'll
my
cut this out.
arrangement.
I'll
Yeah.
stop
Oh, no,
the
no, but I
thing.
can tell
We're
you my
offline now.
arrangement
Okay.
with the I have to pull up, like, I had a contract with Bo, because we both agreed that we wanted to make sure that as things progressed, if we did get sponsorship and things like that, that we were both felt that we were, getting what we wanted out of it. And but yeah, I can't really get into that right now, but I would actually love to have a conversation with you off, just about that sometime, and just getting something kind of, I don't know. I need to think about it more. I need to think
Well,
about what
yeah,
I want and what I want it
I'm
to
ready to
be.
go whenever you want. I've been actually thinking about this for a while now, actually, because I think you do have the talent to do it. And I'm disappointed that you weren't able to do more than 4 episodes of your podcast. I
I
mean,
know.
as far as what I
Yeah.
do, the back end of the stuff, I've gotten used to it. I'm not
Okay.
perfect. I make tons of
Yeah. See,
freaking
that's the part
mistakes,
I don't
unfortunately.
really. Yeah. No,
You would
you're
definitely
right.
have to look over my shoulder and, judge, am I, as the grammar, right? Is this your voice? Do you want this or whatever? I'm not saying anything like that. And ultimately, this is something that you can do yourself. This isn't very hard. You just have to be motivated to actually do the parts to put it together. And
I
then
know,
I mean,
and I'm not
honestly, my
motivated right
conversation with you, I edit the beginning, I edit the end, I do a little bit of art, and it's done within like an hour. I have it published, and it's 2 hours of my life talking to you, and
now.
then
Right.
an hour of publishing. It's easy, simple. You don't need a producer to do it. I mean, maybe I can just walk you through the first couple of weeks or the first couple of months, or hold your hand until you're ready. But there's no reason to
Well,
share
I have all of
anything.
that. I have all of that info
You have
on, like, how to
everything.
do it step by
Exactly.
step. I just, I
The
honestly
motivation
don't
left.
really. Well, I don't really have the time. I mean, between writing a book and and promoting the other one, I've been very short on time until recently, because everything's sort of been at a standstill because of my health. So
Yeah. I mean, all it
yeah.
takes is an
So
hour,
that could be a big
too.
silver lining, right? It's to just
Mhm.
like get through it.
And the fact that you'd have an audience. What you do
Kind of.
is out there. People do it. People
Yeah,
have the things, but I
I
mean,
could potentially have a bigger audience, but I think what happens is people, they expect regularity. And if you
that's
don't
what I'm
produce,
saying.
yeah, no,
That's what
that's
I'm saying. Yeah.
100% true. Like, there's one podcast that I really enjoy. It's called Family Ghosts. And
Okay.
it's so cool. You would really like it. They're telling stories about family Basically, like family stories, like family myths that have always been in your family and investigating whether or not it's true. Like, for example, the first one was the guy who hosts the show. He had heard that there was this jewel heist and he kind of investigates it through interviewing his family members. And then there's two more episodes and they're wonderful. And then now it's been like, oh my God, almost 2 years since they've put out a couple of things, but they're not the same thing. And it was just such a good idea, and I've stayed subscribed to it. I'm waiting it out because I think there's 3 episodes on there, and it's just such a cool approach, but it obviously takes a ton of production and a ton of editing, and you can tell that as a
Yeah.
listener even.
These are frustrating, aren't they? Because I mean, you can tell where the corporations step in and say,
They're
"Okay, guys,
they're
we're
at,
gonna
like,
put
NPR level in their
yeah,
production, but probably not
exactly
at NPR level in their
two
funding.
people,
So,
right? Two people
yeah.
doing it, putting it together, and it's impossible. I can't imagine. I barely put any effort into any of these things I do, except for the writing, right? But I mean, they like what's it called? What is the other one? The American Stories. What's the big podcast right now?
This
It's NPR.
This
This
American Life, you mean?
Yeah, that
Yeah,
that is so well produced. I
I know.
love how they do their interviews where the interview will actually tell you the story and then break and let the interviewer tell their part. It's just brilliant. It's really well done. I mean, I thought about doing it and the effort would just be amazing. I don't have time, but there's like 20 people probably working on that show. Dedicating weeks
Oh,
to that one
absolutely.
specific moment.
Oh, yeah, and they have
It's
a
like
budget for travel and all that good stuff, so
yeah, so you have to start small. But I mean, imagine if you can do a weekly podcast over time, within a year, you could develop a nice audience. And I would probably try to listen and fail miserably, but I would definitely be aware of it and cheer for you.
just be subscribed and rate it with 5 stars. That's all I ask.
Exactly. Nobody does that for me. So
I know. I need to go in and do that. Actually, I need to go. I need to go rate you.